And as you see, we have quite a bit of action to take today. So hopefully it'll be a lively meeting today. So with that, this is already our third virtual TPC meeting, huh? Is that, Vivian?
That is correct, yeah. Right?
So thank you all for your patience throughout this, the COVID-19 and the engagement. I think we haven't missed a beat. I think we've been meeting more virtually than in person, huh? We're batting 1,000 for each month. Anyhow, maybe we don't have, everybody hasn't attended the prior meetings. So before we officially get started, I wanted to go over some of the rules of engagement for these virtual meetings. First of all, this is a public meeting and is being recorded. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact Ivan Jimenez at 786-973-9546 or at the email provided here so that a member of our technical team can provide you support and get you on board here. Council members are encouraged to enable their video cameras so that we could see each other here. Presenters are encouraged to enable their video cameras when presenting and to mute their microphones when not speaking. For council members only, to move a motion or amendment, the council member shall unmute his or her microphone, clearly state his or her name for the record, and propose or second a motion. The TPO clerk will then record the action verbally and confirm the council member's name. The TPC chairman will then call to a vote, starting with assenting votes. Council members in favor shall state their names and for the record and verbally express yay. The chairman will then call for dissenting votes. Council members in opposition shall state their names for the record and verbally express nay. All right, this rules haven't changed. So with that, let's get going. And the first order of business, Vivian, Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call to make sure we have quorum?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. The following council members have advised they will be attending today. Jose Ramos.
Hi.
Hello, welcome. Manny Armada. Did I hear Manny Armada? All right, Elia Nunez from DPW.
Present.
Thank you, Elia. Danny Iglesias, FPOT.
Present.
Barbara Handrahan, SFRTA.
Present.
Michelle Lopez, Miami-Dade County Public Schools.
Present.
Javier Rodriguez, Expressway Authority.
I'm here.
Thank you. Jose Sanchez, City of Hialeah.
Present.
John Tristan Jackson, City of Miami.
Present.
Okay, let's go over the rules and get, if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. We're getting echo. Thank you.
Chairman.
Folks, please mute. Thank you.
All right, the last person I called was John Tristan Jackson, City of Miami. I did not hear whether he's present.
Yeah, I'm present here.
Oh, great, thank you. Bernard Buxton Teta, City of Miami Gardens.
Present.
Thank you, Bernard. Julio Brea, City of Homestead.
Here.
Carlos Arroyo, City of Doral.
Present.
Jorge Gomez, City of Coral Gables.
Good afternoon, President.
I have not called. Mr. Chairman, you have quorum.
Vivian?
Was somebody else trying to speak?
Yes, Vivian, it's Jose Gonzalez. Hi, I'm present.
Oh, great. All right, Jose, welcome. I got you down.
Hi.
All right, Madam Clerk, do we have quorum?
Yes, we do.
Awesome, great. So first order of business, do we have, Madam Clerk, any changes to the agenda?
No modifications to the agenda.
All right, great. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
This is Javier. So moved.
Second?
George Gomez, second.
Michelle Lopez, second.
So we, George Gomez seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, guess it passed unanimously. Next item, approval of minutes. Do we have any comments? Anybody have any comments on the minutes? All right, hearing none, do you have move for approval of the minutes?
Move it. Julio.
Julio Brea moves the item. Do I have a second?
Jose Sanchez, second.
Jose Sanchez, second. Thank you. All right. So we have 3 action items today, and let's begin with the first action item A. Madam Clerk, can you read it into the record, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Resolution recommending approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2020 Transportation Improvement Program to include a milling and resurfacing project in the area of Southwest 147th Avenue to Southwest 157th Avenue from Bird Road to Miller Drive. This is a Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works item.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we have with us Elliot Nunez with DTPW, and I think there's other staff. I think Claudia Diaz is also with us if you have any questions. So can I move and get the item seconded before discussion?
This is Javier. I'll move it.
Okay,
This is Elia, second.
okay, thank you. All right, let's go into discussion for the item. Anybody wish to have a question for DTPW on this item?
Michelle Lopez, Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We only request that coordination with the school district occur prior to commencement of the project, as there is a school in close proximity to the project.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right. Hearing none, I'll put the item to vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second.
everybody.
Second
Thank
item,
you.
Madam Clerk, can you please read it into the record?
Yes, of course. Resolution recommending approval of an amendment to the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan to include in the partially funded section of the plan a roadway widening project along Hialeah Gardens Boulevard from approximately Okeechobee Road to Northwest 138th Street from 4 lanes to 6 lanes. This also is a Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works item.
All right, thank you. Do we have anybody that wants to move in a second before we get into discussion?
Jose Sanchez, move it.
Robert Handrahan, second.
All right, thank you. All right. So discussion on Elia or DTPW staff, do you want to address this item to the TPC or?
Sure. If anyone has any questions, it is for a PD&E phase of the project, and we're asking it to be added for priority 1.
Okay. And I believe this is also reflected in the next item. So it's kind of linked between the two for the list of program priorities. So anybody have any questions for DTPW on this item?
Jose Sanchez would like to say something to the board. I would like to request or I wish for a favorable response on this item. This is a project that has been worked on for quite a while between Hialeah Gardens and the city of Hialeah. There's just 2 additional projects on each end. There's one being completed as we speak right now on the north end, which is 138th Street, and Hialeah Gardens Boulevard is being done by FDOT. And there's another project on the lines on the south end, which will be the intersection of Oki and Hialeah Gardens Boulevard. This project is necessary because the main link between Okeechobee Road and I-75, and also because what we refer to as Hialeah annexation, we've had significant development there, and we're experiencing a lot more traffic. And within, I would say, the next 2 years, our annexation, which is 3 square miles, we anticipate it being, if not fully, almost developed. We have about a half square mile of residential that's already been developed and should be done about by the end of the year. And then the industrial, which is the other 2.5 square miles, we expect for it to be completed within the next 2 years. So a favorable response will be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Say, anybody else on this item? All right, let me close the discussion and put it to this item to a vote. All in favor for this item, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, item passes unanimously. Thank you. Next
Thank
item.
you.
Madam Clerk, please read it into the record.
Resolution recommending approval of the annual Transportation Planning Organization list of program priorities. This is a Miami-Dade TPO item.
Thank you. And as a TPO item, we do have Mr. Chris Rosenberg, who does have a short presentation on this item. So let's have the presentation and then we'll address the item. So Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the council. I'm before you today presenting our 2026 TPO list of program priorities. I look forward to presenting to you, and we'll be happy to take any questions at the conclusion of my presentation. Next slide. So what I will be going over today briefly is just a little bit of background. All of you on this committee are very well versed in the transportation planning process, so I won't get into too much details, but please stop me if you have any questions. This year we'll be going through the description of how we modified the list of program priorities, including its modal organization, how we prioritized and the process behind that prioritization, and some of the project highlights that we have included in this year's list. In addition, I will be going over a brief fiscal summary, including how that is broken down between the modes of transportation. And hopefully at the end, we will get a recommended action. Next slide. So the list of program priorities is basically the bridge or the first last mile connection between the long range transportation plan and the transportation improvement program. It's the mechanism in which we deliver the projects from the LRTP into the TIP. It is the mechanism that we deliver the 5th year of our TIP, and also it is transmitted to FDOT so that they can work it into the development of their tentative work program. We always work through the long-range transportation plan to make sure that there is consistency amongst our documents and that we are abiding by the urbanized transportation process. Next slide. So we're here a little early, and we traditionally are always early on this process. Statutorily, it is required that each MPO submit their list of program priorities by October 1st of each year. As you'll notice, it is June, but this is very much intentional. We always make sure that we work with the Florida Department of Transportation in a very cohesive manner. We work hand in hand to make sure that we have this list in front of them as early as possible. As you recall, last month we had our Transportation Improvement Program approved. This is our first ability to work on the new TIP. So this basically informally kicks off the new cycle, and it allows us to work early with the department to make sure that we can address all the funding needs in our region. Next slide. So although this is a TPO staff-led effort and we are the coordinators, by no means are we in a silo. We work very closely with all the transportation partners. This year we more formally organized a matrix to solicit input from all of our agencies. We went through the TIP Development Committee as a first run. We also went through the TIPITAC, Transportation Planning Technical Advisory Committee, and did direct outreach with all 34 municipalities in which we sought out projects in a prioritized fashion. The TPO staff received those projects. We received over 41 projects and then did a consistency analysis with the Long Range Transportation Plan and ETDM to make sure that we were selecting the top tier projects to transmit to FDOT. Next slide. So the process as it is laid out in the MPO handbook, it is required that we bring this item both to our citizens committee, which we did last week. We presented successfully the list of program priorities to the CTAC, received unanimous approval of the document. Today we are before the TPC, and then it will go to our TPO governing board next Thursday for their June 18th governing board meeting. Once it is formally approved by the governing board, we then transmit it to FDOT and work very closely with them to make sure that we are adhering to the process and making sure that we can take advantage of any funding opportunities or project advancements that have been going on so that we can get as many projects funded as possible. Next slide. So this year what we did was we reorganized the list to better reflect the intermodal prioritization of our region. Also following board direction and previous resolutions from the TPO governing board, we have our SMART plan projects and other transit supportive projects. Something of worth note is that we have a very robust complete streets section of the list of program priorities, including bike pedestrian improvements, safe routes to school, transportation alternatives, but also very crucially, the first last mile and trail connections to our main corridors. We did highlight a roadways section that includes capacity and TSM&O, and also included an other technology section, which includes some of our connected autonomous vehicle projects and some TSM&O non-specific projects. Next slide. So these are some of the project highlights, and hopefully all of you have had a chance to look at the actual list, but if you have any specific questions, we can go through it. But at a higher level, our SMART corridors remain on the list of program priorities. The request for the North Corridor was officially transmitted in this list for the right-of-way based off of the FDOT estimate. We also have the BERT Express network for the Bus Express Rapid Transit projects, several requests for route operations, continuation of those that are already funded, and funding requests for the new routes that are hopefully going to be kicking off in the next 5 years. Third, within the SMART Plan projects category is the demonstration projects. This year we have 8 new project requests that are funneled through the Service Development Grant Program. Second is our mobility projects. As I mentioned, this is a much more robust section of the list of program priorities this year. We have our safe routes to school, 7 new school applications included this year that was coordinated between the school board and Miami-Dade County. our Complete Streets project. We have several important first last mile connectors that we hope to get funded. Our transportation alternatives, we received 10 project applications that made it through the ranking process that was jointly completed through FDOT and the TPO. And we have some other multimodal improvements, including the Coral Gables trolley and Miami Beach transit lanes included in the mobility section. Last but not least is the roadway improvement projects. We included a very important request for the capacity section, which is to bring back in the Golden Glades interchange reconstruction. We've been working very closely with the department to make sure that if there's any funding availability through the SIS program, that we can get this project back in the 5-year window. And last but not least, the TSM&O section for the technology improvements, which includes an autonomous vehicle pilot that we're excited about. Next slide. So this is basically a breakdown of the modalities and funds per year requested. As you'll notice, the heaviest year is fiscal year 26, which is by part of the process. We are trying to add a new 5th year into the window, but where there are fund availabilities, we do have projects in the common 4 years that we can hopefully get advanced. So that is why you see those funds laid out in the earlier years. Smart Plan is the top group, but we also have a very healthy roadway request this year, mostly taken up by the Golden Glades Interchange project. Next slide. So I know I have Elia on. Yes.
Yes. Let me handle this over here. We received, after the package was mailed out for the TPC, a list of projects that DTPW wanted to advance. We've incorporated here, but I wanted to have Elia from DTPW kind of go through a little bit of what the thinking is and rationale behind it, because this right now stands outside of the list of program priorities and would need to be folded into this. So Elia.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chris. Yes, at this time, DTPW would like to request an amendment to the TPO annual list of program priorities on the agenda today to include a list of safety projects that our Public Works Department had identified to move forward into the new fiscal years. And I have Claudia and Maria both on the call today to go over these, as well as answer any questions that anyone may have. Claudia? Okay, Maria?
Good afternoon, everyone. So we've added these projects. These have gone through DTPW service request. They've looked at the crashes, and these are some of the improvements that would reduce the crashes that are now existing in these different locations. So we're trying to request for federal money to be able, or funds to be able to implement these projects. If these projects need additional study or in BC ratio according to I believe the federal regulations, then we would like to request for that funding to be able to apply for these projects.
Okay.
And through the chair, there are 13 projects. This is slide 1. Ivan, if you don't mind, just so we can look at slide 2, the remaining projects on this list. Thank you. And thank you, DTPW, for walking us through those. So as Wilson mentioned, these are not included in the list that was part of the mail-out package. These would be amended onto the list with your approval of today's item. All right, next slide.
All right.
So today I seek recommendation of the approval of the 2026 TPO list of program priorities. This will allow us to initiate our conversation with FDOT upon successful approval from the TPO governing board. It's a best practice that's been noticed throughout the state that we work very early with FDOT. We have a great relationship to make sure that we can get as many of these projects funded as possible. So with today's approval, we'll be able to begin that process. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you. All right, since we just had the presentation and we have everybody here, do I have any questions, comments from council members?
Hey, Mr. Chair, and Chris, this is Danny Iglesias, FDOT. Yeah, I'd like to just first thank Chris and the TPO staff for putting together a very good document. I think it's a document that has addressed a lot of the comments that FDOT had conveyed to the TPO, both in our joint certification meetings as well as in previous conversations. So I do appreciate it, and I'm glad to see a lot of priority given to pedestrian and bicycle improvements, as well as to include a priority list for roadway and capacity improvements as well. So staff and myself had an opportunity to quickly look at this document, and we wanted to just share a few, I guess I would term them advisory comments at this time, so that if possible moving forward in future iterations of the document, they can be considered. So the first one of those advisory comments would be that the TPO be mindful of the amount of SU funds that are being made available for every cycle, so that the amount of priority being given or being budgeted for potential SU funding is consistent from year to year. So that would be something that we would advise the TPO to incorporate in future LOPPs. With respect to prioritizing funding needs, it does become difficult, although I know that there are needs that come up with respect to appropriating funds in early years of the 5-year work program. Obviously, funds are less available during, earlier years in the program than in later years. So we will provide our comments as we go through our work program development cycle with respect to those requests that are in earlier years moving forward. With respect to the LOPP also, I did notice that there were some requests to specific statewide programs that exceed the allocation that the department gets statewide for these programs. So for example, some of the service development grants, the state park and ride programs, I believe there was also one for use of, for example, let me just scroll to that real quick. Of the South Dade Transitway Corridor, for example, there's a transit corridor program where the ask was for about $14 million in fiscal year 26. I think statewide, the appropriation for that program is about 1.4 million. So it does become a challenge, obviously, to fund to that amount that's being requested in the LOPP. So that's something I think that should be taken into account when developing the list. And then finally, with respect to the safety improvement projects, I did notice that the fiscal year that was being asked of is in 25, which I think will give us enough time to make sure that the county has the safety studies and the benefit cost ratios established for each one of those locations. That's a federal requirement that we would have to coordinate with central office and FHWA. And it becomes imperative that we have that information before we program those projects. So I just wanted to put that on the record. But overall, a very comprehensive document, and we appreciate the level of detail. If I could also ask that the TPO prioritize the list within the groupings. I know that that was a comment that was made during the joint certification session with us, and I did notice that, for example, the safety improvement projects in priority grouping number 3 do have an actual number assigned to each project. And while it's probably safe to assume that the lists are prioritized in order, It would be nice to see a number assigned to each one of the projects within the grouping. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Chris, I know we didn't go into in too much detail the prioritization. Can you go through the tiered approach that had been proffered through in the list?
Certainly. So basically, as we looked through in the prior slides, we had three main groupings of projects: Group 1, Smart Plan; Group 2, Mobility Projects; and Group 3, Roadway Improvement Projects. So that is the order of the overall modality prioritization. And Danny, we do look forward to working to detail out some of those sub prioritizations. We'll work with you and your team to get that more refined. But in general, this followed the guidance from previous resolutions and legislation from our board to remain consistent. So I think that this is reflective of the board's direction.
And Danny, and I think it was brought up and that in some of these categories, there are separate prioritization processes that address elements that we have included in our list of program priorities. So we may have the ability to be able to prioritize certain categories that have this outside process, and also those projects that are obviously contained in the long range plan do get addressed through the prioritization as reflected in the long range transportation plan. I don't know if that is something that you envision and would like to see as part of this list of program priorities. And if so, I think at this moment would be the best to offer that statement so that we can prepare it in advance of the TPO board approval later this month. Because I think, as you well know, in the process, as the TPC, these items go to the board as they come out of TPC. So I think we have the opportunity to gel at this moment of coming together. For example, what DTPW has proposed and what we recommend out of the TPC is what we're going to bring to the TPO governing board later this month. So I don't know if that is something that you want to interject with a bit of nuance into the resolution or the motion that we would entertain.
Sure. Yes, I would. Anything that helps the department prioritize the needs from a funding standpoint and from a work program standpoint is beneficial and helpful to us as well as to the municipalities and the TPO. So I would, any information that can be provided to further break down the priority list is helpful and beneficial to us, and we would request that that be considered in the LOPP document.
All right, thank you. Any other council member comments?
Hi, Mr. Chair, this is Elia. I do wanted to ask, I know that our department, Gia, and I went over the plan about a week ago, and she provided some comments to Chris in regards to priority 1 with the smart plan corridors. On some of the projects listed there, the description was a little bit different than what we had submitted to FDOT as part of our grant application. So I know she had sent her notes to Chris, and I just wanted to make sure that those got implemented.
Okay.
Yes, through the chair, we have captured those comments. Those are minor administrative adjustments that we will make sure that are included to our TPO governing board and transmitted to FDOT accordingly.
Thank you.
All right.
That's all
Any other? Thank you, Elia. Any other comments? All right. Let's. Who wants to make the motion? Because this one's a little bit more complex.
Mr. Chair.
I would make the motion, this is Dan Iglesias, FDOT, to approve the LOPP with an additional prioritization within the groupings of the projects that are listed, as well as with the ability to take those advisory comments that I made earlier in my comment into account for future LOPP development.
Okay. Do I have a second for that motion? Now, okay. Elliot, because remember what we had mentioned about the safety projects. Right now, they're not in the list of program priorities. So I think the council would need to bring those in as part of any motion.
Okay. And so can I add a motion to second his with the addition of the safety projects that we presented today?
Well, I didn't hear a second to Danny's motion.
Okay. I would
So
like
you can
to
make the motion.
be the second. Yes, motion to be the second.
You're seconding Danny's motion, and now you're proposing to a friendly amendment to Danny's motion.
Correct, to include the safety projects that we have included in today's meeting as part of the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, this is Javier, and I'll second the amendment to the motion.
Okay. Danny, is that a friendly amendment?
2025, right? Is the year?
Yes.
Yes, I am okay with that.
Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, before I call, we have a motion, we have a second, we have an amendment, we have a second to the amendment. So, and it was a friendly amendment. Can we state the motion that we're voting on at this point?
Okay, so the motion is to approve the item as amended to include that the projects within the program priorities include a grouping of projects that lists, oh boy, maybe if Danny could repeat his.
Gladly.
Thank you.
To approve the LOPP as developed, provided that the groupings are sub-prioritized and that my advisory comments are taken into account for future LOPP development by the TPO.
And I second the motion with the inclusion of the safety project.
And those were the 13 safety projects.
Correct, and this is Elia.
So we had a seconded for that motion of Javier. We're just like a replay. So Javier?
Yes, that's seconded. That's a second that motion. Yes.
So now the item's up for vote as amended.
As amended. All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Item passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for getting us through that and navigating. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
If I may ask a question, and maybe it's just some advice. Now that we've approved this program of priorities, the LOPP, and it does have the 3 categories of the SMART plan, the mobility and capacity. When it's presented to the board in a couple of weeks, given the realities that we're going through right now in the shifts of financing, of modality, and of such, is the board going to understand that there's flexibility within this list of priorities? between now and October when it has to be adopted. And I say that because I think the board should know that there's flexibility as this program is being developed in conjunction with the DOT.
Yeah. And Javier, you bring up a good point. That
I say this because of the recent MPO meetings, TPO meetings, where there is some uncomfortableness of going one route versus another. This is a very flexible,
yes,
has to be a flexible list that, can change between now and October.
yes, and obviously this was brought up when the TIP was coming for approval, of understanding that it was a snapshot, in essence, of a pre-COVID-19 snapshot, and we are still, and the department is still figuring out what is the short and long-term ramifications of this. And any of that, I would imagine, would be part of the gaming cycle heading into the latter part of this year. And whatever reality, whatever impact would have to be brought back to the board. And the board, as you mentioned, not only do they want to be informed and know about this, but informed as soon as possible, because I think everybody understands that there is a ripple effect and impact throughout the program. And we're sitting here today going through the motions of a pre-COVID-19 situation. And when the dust settles a bit, we will know where we stand moving forward and how much of the program will be impacted moving forward, including the TIP, the list of program priorities, the LRTP, and as such. So I think there's going to be a lot of robust discussions down the road. I don't know, Danny.
And I'm glad Javier brought this up, because we don't know yet where we stand moving forward. And the reality is that we are not going to be seeing the revenues that we anticipated to see before COVID-19 hit us all. So I think it's a very valid point, and it's something that needs to caveat the entire LOPP effort, because at the end of the day, we're definitely going to see shortfalls. How much, we don't yet know, but I think it's safe to assume that we're going to see them.
And Chris, we may need to put, addressing this to the board, as Javier said, to include this in the presentation so they understand the context of what they're approving.
Yeah, Chris, they would be approving a list of priorities in different categories that, if in a perfect world all the revenues were there, this is the way we would like to prioritize it. Having said that, it is flexible enough that depending on revenues, these priorities can be reshuffled within the list of priorities, and still address the needs of this community over the next, X amount of years, 5 years, 6 years or so. The point is not to not to put them in a corner.
I think that it's helpful when we go through that exercise to get that list of that priority list within the grouping, because then it's going to let us know what's number one and what's not number one within those groupings, so that we can see what we can do from a funding standpoint.
Listen, sitting in Danny's chair for many years, those decisions are critical, and you always want to know, can I fund priority 3 instead of priority 6, or vice versa, and what impact and ramification that has. So it's important to know what those numbers, what those priorities are. So.
All right, thank you. So moving forward, we don't have any action items. So the next item here is for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Javier Rodriguez moves.
Jose Sanchez second.
Jose Sanchez seconds. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
I heard everybody's voice. All right, folks. Listen, I hope that this is our last virtual meeting, but never knows. I haven't chaired a real live meeting yet. It's all been virtual for me. So we'll see when we get together again. And I want to thank you again for really addressing many of the important requirements that the TPO has, and that we have no choice in the matter, and we got to keep it moving forward. And all the council members have done a fantastic job by attending. Thank you so much, and everybody stay safe, and we'll see each other again. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Thanks.